The ISV horizon was burning. Smoke filled the air as flames roared through the metal walls of the once sturdy space station, turning its sterile hallways into hellish corridors of chaos. Explosions rocked the outer hull, sending shockwaves through the station and causing lights to flicker and die. Alarms blared, their sharp shrieks barely audible over the roaring fires that consumed everything in their path. The station was supposed to be a peaceful research facility orbiting Kepler 91c, a quiet outpost for studying alien worlds. No one had expected an attack, but the screams told a different story. The screams told a tale of horror, something monstrous, something far beyond the limits of what anyone could have imagined. Lieutenant Jack Rayner ran through the wreckage, his breath coming in short gasps, his heart racing. His squad had already been wiped out by something horrifying, something he couldn't even describe. They had barely made it this far. Now Jack was alone. He didn't know what was attacking them, but he knew one thing for sure. It was big, it was deadly, and it was still here. He kept his rifle close, ready for anything. The air was thick with smoke, and the heat made the inside of his armor feel like an oven. His helmet's visor flickered, showing a countdown for the air supply. He didn't have much time. As he moved deeper into the station, Jack saw signs of the destruction. Bodies, some human, some alien, were scattered across the halls. They had been torn apart, their limbs twisted in ways that no living creature should bend. Some of the bodies belonged to the Kavari, the silver-skinned aliens who had been allies of humanity for years. Their tall, thin frames were easily recognizable, but now their bodies lay in pools of blood and ash. Jack's stomach twisted in disgust, but he didn't stop. He couldn't afford to. There was a sound ahead, a soft, high-pitched scream. It wasn't human. It was more desperate, more frightened, as if it came from something that had no idea what was happening around it. Jack's instincts kicked in. He ran toward the noise, stepping over the wreckage of metal and bodies. As he turned a corner, he saw her. She was small, no older than a child, but she was a Kavari, a species of peaceful aliens who had once helped humanity in the war against the Varnok. Her body was covered in burns, her arms singed and blackened by the fire. Her large, black eyes were wide with terror, and she was clutching something in her hands. It was glowing, faintly, like a small sun. She screamed again, louder this time, but it was the kind of scream that came from pure fear. Behind her, through the haze of smoke and fire, Jack saw something move. A shadow, something huge, with glowing red eyes and too many limbs. Jack didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle, aimed at the creature, and fired. 3 shots hit it in the chest, but it didn't fall. The beast roared in pain, its body shifting and squirming as it charged at him with unnatural speed. Jack dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's razor-sharp claws. The thing was fast, faster than anything he had ever seen. It didn't seem to be fazed by the gunfire. Jack knew then that he wasn't dealing with any ordinary enemy. He threw a grenade, the blast lighting up the darkened hall and forcing the creature back. It shrieked, retreating into the flames, but Jack wasn't about to let it escape. He ran forward, not caring about the heat or the smoke. The Kavari girl, still standing amidst the flames, was staring at him in shock. "Run!" he shouted, but she didn't move. She couldn't. She was frozen in place, too terrified to do anything. Jack ran toward her, pulling her out of the way as the beast lunged again. He didn't care about the risk anymore. He was going to get her out of here, no matter the cost. As he lifted her into his arms, he could feel the heat of the fire searing through his armor. He made a promise to himself then. He wasn't leaving without her. Together, they would survive. He just had to make it out alive. With the Kavari girl still in his arms, Jack pushed through the burning station, knowing that whatever had attacked this place wasn't just a random threat. It was something much worse, something that had come to destroy them all, and he wasn't about to let that happen. The moment Jack scooped the Kavari girl into his arms, he knew the fight wasn't over. The beast was still out there, and it wasn't about to let them escape. He ran, not looking back, his boots pounding against the metal floors as flames and smoke billowed around him. His heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline pushing him to move faster, but the fire was closing in. Every corner he turned, every hallway he raced down, felt like it was becoming smaller and tighter. The heat was unbearable, but Jack didn't care. His rifle was still clutched in his hand, and the girl, who had stopped screaming, was now trembling, clinging to him with one arm. She had stopped fighting, stopped crying, but Jack could feel her fear. She didn't understand what was happening, and for a moment, Jack wondered if she ever would, but there was no time for doubt. They needed to survive. Behind them, the beast growled. It wasn't far now. Jack could hear its claws scraping against the metal as it moved through the fire. He didn't need to turn around to know it was gaining on them. The creature was fast, relentless, and it didn't seem to feel pain. The blast from the grenade had slowed it, but Jack could tell it hadn't done nearly enough. It was coming for them, and it would stop at nothing to get its prey. Jack ran through a doorway, into another corridor, his thoughts racing. The station's layout was confusing, the walls and floors shifting from damage. He was losing track of where he was. Everything was starting to blur together in the chaos. But then, ahead of him, he saw the faint glow of an emergency escape door. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance. He pushed himself harder, but the creature wasn't far behind. Jack could hear it growling, screeching, and getting closer with every step. He knew the door wouldn't hold for long. If he didn't reach it soon, they were both dead. His eyes locked onto the emergency door, the red warning light blinking, as it struggled to stay intact under the pressure of the fire. Jack gritted his teeth and took one last sprint toward the door. He reached out to slam his hand on the emergency control panel, praying it would open. There was a mechanical whir, then a hiss of air. The door began to open, but it was slow. Too slow. The beast was right behind him now. Jack could hear its claws scraping on the ground as it sprinted, its breath hot and heavy. It was going to catch them. He could feel it. With one final burst of strength, Jack threw himself and the girl through the opening door, just as the creature lunged. The door slammed shut behind them, the heavy metal clanging shut with a deafening noise. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the creature's roar of frustration echoed from the other side of the door. Jack slumped against the wall, out of breath, sweat dripping down his face. The girl, still in his arms, was breathing heavily too, but she wasn't crying anymore. She had gone quiet, as if the terror of everything had overwhelmed her. Jack knew she was scared. She had seen death. She had witnessed her people die. And now, she was alone in the middle of this nightmare, with only a human to protect her. The escape door led them into a small control room, untouched by the fire. Jack laid the girl down on a table and checked his communicator, hoping for a signal. But there was nothing. The network was down. They were cut off. The situation had only grown worse. The creature, whatever it was relentless. And Jack had no idea how to stop it. His mind raced, but there was only one thing he knew for sure. They couldn't stay here forever. The thing was still hunting them, and sooner or later, it would find them. The question wasn't whether they could escape, it was how. And Jack was starting to realize that he had no idea how they were going to survive the rest of this nightmare. But he couldn't give up. Not now. Not after everything. They had to fight. He looked at the girl, her eyes filled with fear, and made a silent promise. They would make it out. He would make sure of it. Jack sat in the small control room, the silence pressing down on him like a heavy weight. The Kavari girl, lying on the table, was still trembling, her big black eyes staring at him with a mix of fear and confusion. She didn't understand what was happening, and Jack couldn't blame her. The world around them had turned to ashes, and they were both trapped in a nightmare with no way out. His mind raced as he tried to think of a way to stop the creature outside. He couldn't fight it head on. It was too strong, too fast. His rifle had barely phased it, and the grenade only slowed it down for a moment. If they were going to survive, they needed a plan, a real plan. But the room was dead silent, with no communication from outside. Jack's attempts to contact command had failed. The station's systems were damaged beyond repair. They were cut off. There was no backup coming, no help on the way. Just him and the Kavari girl. The thought made his stomach churn. He was used to fighting in wars, to facing danger head-on. But this was different. The creature outside wasn't like anything he'd faced before. It wasn't a soldier or a warrior. It was something else. Something ancient and deadly. A force of nature that couldn't be reasoned with. And it was hunting them. Jack turned to look at the girl. She was still holding the glowing object in her hands, the one she had clutched so tightly since he found her. It was small, the size of a fist, and it pulsed with a strange, soft light. Jack had no idea what it was, but he knew it was important. Maybe it was the key to everything. Maybe it could stop the creature. He had to find out. The girl looked at him, her eyes wide, almost pleading. She didn't speak. Kavari didn't speak like humans did. Their communication was more telepathic. Emotions and thoughts passed through their gaze. Jack had learned a little about their ways during his time stationed on Kepler 91c, but he wasn't an expert. Still, he could tell that the girl was afraid. She was afraid of the creature, but she was also afraid of something else. Something she couldn't explain. Jack took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He couldn't let his fears show. Not to her. He needed to stay calm. For both of their sakes. "What is this thing?" he muttered, mostly to himself. He reached out carefully, trying not to startle the girl. She flinched at first, but then, after a moment, she handed him the glowing object. The moment Jack touched it, he felt a strange pulse of energy course through his fingers. It wasn't electrical, not like anything he had ever felt before. It was ancient. Alive, almost. His heart skipped a beat as the object glowed brighter, and suddenly, he felt a connection, a link, a bond. His mind filled with images, strange alien symbols flashing through his vision. He saw the creature, the one that was hunting them, its eyes burning with rage. But there was something else too, something Jack couldn't quite understand. It was like the creature had a purpose, a mission. And the girl, the Kavari girl, was part of it. The images faded as quickly as they came, and Jack was left holding the object, his mind reeling from the experience. He didn't know what it meant, but one thing was clear. The girl wasn't just a helpless victim. She was something more, something powerful. He looked back at her, and for the first time, she spoke. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper, but Jack could hear the urgency in her. Words, "We must stop it, before it finds us." Jack nodded, though he didn't fully understand what she meant. He had to trust her. She was their only chance. Suddenly, the ground shook. The creature had found them. Jack didn't waste any time. He grabbed the rifle, checked the charge on his weapon, and glanced at the girl. "Stay close. We'll make it through this together." The walls of the control room began to crack as the creature's roar echoed through the station. It was closing in fast, and there was no time left. Jack's only hope now was to use whatever knowledge the girl had, whatever power the glowing object gave them. If they were going to survive, they needed to fight back, this time, with everything they had. Jack took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He wasn't going to let the creature win. Not today. Not when humanity's survival depended on it. With the Kavari girl by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. The creature's roar was deafening as it slammed into the control room doors, its sheer force making the entire station tremble. Jack gripped the rifle tightly in his hands, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never felt so outmatched. The beast outside was relentless, and he knew it would stop at nothing to tear through the door. But as the walls vibrated under the impact, he could see the girl's face, calm and focused. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't afraid. The fear that had clouded her eyes earlier was gone. Instead, there was something else there. Determination. Like she knew something he didn't. Jack couldn't help but wonder what she had seen in that glowing object. He had felt the strange energy pulse through his fingers when he touched it, but it wasn't enough. He didn't understand what was happening. But if there was a way out, if there was a way to stop the creature, she was the key. The girl stood up slowly, her eyes never leaving the door. Her small hands moved gently, almost reverently, over the object, and the soft glow pulsed brighter. Jack watched in awe as she whispered something under her breath. Words that were alien to him, words that felt ancient, like they held the weight of 1,000 years. The air around them grew still, and Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something in her voice, something powerful, and for a brief moment, Jack could feel the room itself responding, as if the station was alive and listening to her. The creature's growls outside became more frantic, but Jack felt a flicker of hope. Whatever she was doing, it was working. With one final soft whisper, the girl raised the object high above her head. The glow brightened into a blinding light, and for a moment, Jack couldn't see anything but the white-hot brilliance. The door groaned under the weight of the creature's assault, but the light from the object began to pulse, and suddenly there was a sharp, high-pitched hum that filled the room. Jack stumbled back, raising his hand to shield his eyes from the intense light. The beast outside howled in agony, its roars turning into shrieks of pain. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he heard the creature collapse against the door, its weight causing the entire room to shake. The girl, still holding the object above her, closed her eyes as the light began to fade. The air crackled with energy, and Jack could feel the temperature drop as if the very atmosphere had shifted. The sound of the creature's pain grew fainter, then vanished altogether. When the light finally dimmed, Jack opened his eyes. The creature was gone. The door was still standing, but the presence of the monster was no longer pressing against it. The girl slowly lowered the object, her breath heavy but steady. She didn't speak, but Jack could see the exhaustion on her face. Whatever she had done, it had drained her. Did you kill it? Jack asked, his voice hoarse. He was still in shock. The creature had been a force of nature, something he never thought could be defeated. Yet, in that moment, the girl had done the impossible. The girl nodded slowly, her eyes locking onto Jack's with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. It was clear that she hadn't just defeated the creature, she had controlled it. She had harnessed the power of the object, whatever it was, to banish the creature. But the cost was written on her face. She had given everything to stop it. Jack took a step forward, his hand reaching out instinctively to help her, but the girl shook her head. "We must leave," she whispered, her voice weak but resolute. She was right. The station was in ruins. The creature was gone, but the danger wasn't over. There was still a war to be fought, and humanity was on the brink of being overwhelmed. If they were going to make it out alive, they had to move quickly. Jack nodded, understanding the urgency. He didn't have time to question her powers. They didn't have time for anything except survival. With the girl at his side, Jack moved to the control panel, trying to re-establish communication with the outside. The girl's strength had saved them, but they were still alone. There was no backup coming. It was just them now. The weight of that reality settled heavily on Jack's shoulders, but he couldn't afford to feel sorry for himself. They had a chance now, one chance to turn things around. But it wouldn't be easy. The galaxy was full of dangers, and Jack knew that if they were to survive, they would need more than just hope. They would need everything they had. They would need to fight back, just like humans always did. The moment the creature was gone, a silence filled the room, the kind that made the air feel thick and heavy. Jack, still standing beside the girl, knew that their battle was far from over. The creature might have been vanquished for now, but the war they were in, the war humanity was fighting, had only just begun. The girl's eyes were heavy, and Jack could see how drained she was. She had used her power to stop the creature, but at what cost? He could only imagine the toll it had taken on her. Her strength had saved them, but they couldn't rest. Not yet. Jack needed answers, and time was running out. He looked at the girl, and she met his gaze with a look that was both weary and determined. Jack knew that they couldn't stay on the station much longer. The Kavari girl's actions had clearly attracted attention, and it wouldn't be long before more enemies arrived. The alien creature wasn't the only threat they were facing. There were other factions in the galaxy, other species who wouldn't hesitate to destroy humanity if given the chance. Jack had seen enough of that kind of warfare in his time in the fleet. Humanity's enemies were relentless, and they were closing in on them fast. The girl spoke again, her voice faint but clear. She told Jack that the object she had been carrying wasn't just some artifact. It was an ancient relic of her people, something that had the power to alter the very fabric of reality. It was a weapon, but not in the traditional sense. The girl had been trained in its use, but she had only begun to understand its full potential. Jack listened intently, trying to piece together what she was saying. He didn't fully understand the significance of the relic, but it was clear that it was something incredibly dangerous and incredibly powerful. He had a feeling that the girl had been running from something far worse than just the creature they had just faced. Whatever had sent the monster to attack them, whatever force was behind it, was far more than just a rogue alien. It was part of something much larger, a war between civilizations, a struggle for control of the galaxy. And humanity, whether they were ready for it or not, was right in the middle of it. As Jack tried to think of their next move, the control panels in the station flickered to life. A transmission came through, but it was distorted, the words barely understandable. It was a faint signal, but Jack could make out something important. Falling back. Evacuation. Planet. It was from the fleet. Jack's heart raced. The fleet was still alive. There was still a chance for humanity. But they needed to move fast. The station was no longer safe, and staying there would only lead to certain death. The girl, still clutching the relic, seemed to understand the urgency. She didn't need to be told what had to be done. Without speaking, she moved toward the hatch, signaling to Jack that they needed to leave now. Jack grabbed his rifle and followed her, his mind racing. The galaxy was in chaos, and humanity was facing overwhelming odds, but Jack wasn't about to give up. Not now. Not when they still had a chance to make a difference. As they made their way toward the exit, Jack couldn't help but think about how far humanity had come. They had been written off by many, seen as insignificant in the vastness of the galaxy. But they had proven time and again that they were a force to be reckoned with. They were resilient, adaptable, and capable of achieving the impossible when pushed to the edge. This was just another chapter in that story. And as they stepped into the unknown, with the girl beside him and the galaxy before them, Jack felt a surge of hope. Humanity might not have been ready for the war ahead, but they would fight with everything they had. The universe had underestimated them once, it wouldn't make the same mistake again. With the flickering lights of the station fading behind them, Jack and the girl moved forward, ready to face whatever came next. The war was just beginning, and humanity was no longer just a pawn in the galaxy's game. They were players now, and they would fight until the end. As Jack and the girl moved through the corridors of the station, a tense silence hung between them. They both knew the stakes were higher than ever, but neither spoke. Jack's mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead, and he could sense the girl was also lost in her own thoughts. Her grip on the relic was firm, and she seemed focused, but Jack could tell she was exhausted. The strange, powerful object she carried had drained her, but she was still determined. They had to get to the escape pod, and they had to get there fast. They couldn't afford to waste any time. The space station was barely holding together, and every moment spent inside it brought them closer to danger. The creature they had just defeated might have been powerful, but it wasn't the only threat they faced. Others were coming, and if they didn't escape now, they would be caught in the crossfire of a much larger conflict. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as they neared the escape pod bay. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the station, signaling the approach of more enemies. The galaxy was no longer a safe place for humanity. There were too many factions, too many dangerous forces at work, and humanity was caught in the middle of it all. Jack knew that the girl's power was extraordinary, but even she couldn't take on the entire galaxy by herself. Together, though, they might stand a chance. Jack had seen humanity rise up against impossible odds before, and he believed they could do it again. But first, they had to survive. The escape pod bay was a few corridors away now, and Jack's mind kept racing. He was thinking about the fleet's transmission, the one he had heard earlier. They were still alive, but how many of them remained? How many ships had been lost? He didn't know, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that they had to escape, and they had to do it quickly. The station wasn't going to hold much longer. As they reached the pod bay, the door slid open, revealing a dimly lit room. Jack and the girl stepped inside, and he immediately started scanning the room for the nearest pod. He could feel the girl's presence beside him, her energy almost palpable as she took in her surroundings. She was alert, her eyes scanning the room with precision. Then, the warning alarms blared. Red lights flashed, signaling that the station's destruction was imminent. The countdown had already begun. Jack's eyes widened. They had no time left. The girl turned to him, and without a word, they rushed toward the nearest pod. Jack didn't look back. He knew that once they left the station, there would be no going back. They would be on their own, floating in the vast emptiness of space, with nothing but the hope that the fleet was still out there. As the pod's doors slammed shut behind them, Jack initiated the launch sequence. The station trembled once more, and he could feel the tremor beneath his feet as the pod shot into space. The pod's engines roared to life, and they were free. For the first time in what felt like forever, Jack allowed himself a breath of relief, but that moment was short-lived. He knew the real battle had just begun. There was no telling what awaited them out there. The galaxy was at war, and humanity was on the verge of being wiped out. But Jack wasn't going to give up. Not now, not when there was still a chance to fight back. As the pod drifted farther from the station, Jack glanced at the girl beside him. Her face was pale, her eyes closed in exhaustion, but she was still gripping the relic with both hands. Jack wasn't sure what kind of power it held, but he knew it was something that could turn the tide of the war. The girl had already proven that. She was a force to be reckoned with, and Jack was beginning to realize that she might be their best hope for survival. The pod continued to drift through the stars, the vastness of space stretching out before them. Jack knew they couldn't stay out here forever. They had to find the fleet, and they had to do it quickly. But for now, As the silence of space enveloped them, Jack allowed himself a moment of peace. They had escaped the station. They were alive. And as long as they were alive, there was hope. The war wasn't over yet. In fact, it was just beginning. And Jack would fight to the end to ensure humanity's survival. The future of the galaxy depended on it.